2 years after the Russian war in Ukraine began, Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba finally receives an invite to India. Does his visit signify a U-turn, a rethink, or simply rebalancing by both New Delhi and Kiev? And given close India-Russia ties, what is on the Ukrainian wish list for India? Hello and welcome to Worldview at The Hindu with me, Sahasini Haidar. Now this week, New Delhi did have this unusual visitor, the Foreign Minister of Ukraine. Unusual because since the beginning of the Ukraine war and Kuleba's appointment in 2022, no Ukrainian ministers at cabinet level have actually visited Delhi so far or received invites. In the past 2 years, 2 deputy ministers have visited, but that hasn't really changed India's policy. No Indian minister at any rank has yet visited Kiev during the war, although remember several ministers were sent to neighbouring countries of Ukraine to help with bringing home Indian students. The Ministry of External Affairs had a secretary, Sanjay Verma, who visited in 2023. And of course, Prime Minister Modi has spoken on a number of occasions with Ukrainian President Zelensky, met him on the sidelines of the G7 in Hiroshima, but did not accept his request to address the G20 in India or for Ukraine to be a part of that. In contrast, India and Russia have exchanged a number of ministerial and national security advisor visits since the war began. Prime Minister Modi has not visited Moscow or hosted Putin in Delhi, but he did send External Affairs Minister Jaishankar to Russia for a 5-day visit in December. So given that closeness in ties, what exactly was Ukraine's foreign minister hoping for as the outcomes from his visit? Now, speaking just before he landed in Delhi, here's what Kuleba had said. He invoked Mahatma Gandhi to seek Indian support. Listen in.
According to Gandhi, the future depends on what we do in the present. Hence, supporting Ukraine today means supporting freedom and independence, supporting the legacy of the great Mahatma. I believe we can lay a solid foundation for the future of our mutually beneficial relations.
Fairly strong pitch to India's independence there. But what does the message really mean? To begin with, Ukraine wants to reset ties, mend ties, if you like, with India that have really been strained over the past few years by Ukraine's criticism of India's ties with Russia. At the beginning of the war, Zelensky was particularly harsh on India, especially after India abstained on all United Nations, UNGA, UN Security Council, International Atomic Energy Agency and Human Rights Council votes on resolutions that tried to condemn Russia's invasion. Kuleba himself, in fact, had said India must stop buying all oil from Russia, saying it was mixed with the, quote, blood of Ukrainians, as this was funding Russia's war effort. And of course, despite that call, India has increased its oil intake from Russia multiple fold, up to about 30 to 40% of its oil basket. Now, another Zelensky advisor had even questioned India and China's intellect in backing Russia. So by ensuring an invitation from such a staunch Russian partner, Kuleba is in fact trying to also send a message with the optics of the visit. They are, of course, being watched closely in Moscow, especially as Russia is reeling from a massive terror attack this month, more than 130 people dead, which Russia has held Kiev responsible for. So a dual purpose messaging in that sense. Another big part of Mr. Kuleba's visit, Ukraine wants India to become a part of the peace process. Now, in January 2024, President Zelensky had met with the Swiss president in Bern and asked him to set up a peace summit that will for the first time seek to bring Russia and Ukraine to the table at the same time.
Russia, that wants a ceasefire and status quo to precede any talks, has indicated it will not attend.
So what does the West do? As a result, Western powers, Switzerland and Ukraine, want those who they believe have clout with Moscow, like India and China, to attend the summit. Now, the Chinese ambassador has said it is considering the invitation. But the Ministry of External Affairs, when asked, has been non-committal. Listen in to what the MEA spokesperson Ranveer Jaiswal said when I asked him specifically about whether India, which has received the invitation to the Swiss Peace Summit, will actually attend. Listen in.
Our position is very clear on peace initiatives and how we look at the Ukraine-Russia conflict. We continue to encourage peaceful resolution of the conflict through dialogue and diplomacy, and remain open to engaging all ways and means that would help achieve this objective.
Now, in particular, the countries organizing the summit and backing Ukraine want Prime Minister Modi to convey the messages from the summit to President Putin. Now, this is not something new. India has, in fact, said themselves that they have in the past conveyed messages of this sort on the grain initiative to Russia, also on nuclear safety issues. In fact, just this week, here's what External Affairs Minister Jaishankar, who's in Malaysia, said about India's role in conveying messages and balancing during the conflict. Listen in.
Much of our challenge is how do you get this balance right? That we are today still one of the countries who are in a position, where I go back to India tomorrow, I have the Foreign Minister of Ukraine visiting me the day after that. We have also been the country who have the opportunity to talk to the Russians very frankly and bluntly on this issue. On different aspects, others have used us to pass messages.
And apart from all of these reasons, there's the bilateral note. The Ukraine foreign minister was seeking not just political support, but concrete assistance. Remember, India has thus far sent 15 consignments of humanitarian aid to Ukraine during the war. But they're mainly tents, blankets, medicines, that kind of thing. However, what Ukraine wants is for India to allow exports of more technical goods, especially low-cost options for cell phone towers, communication infrastructure. Remember, so much has been damaged by Russian bombing. They also want medical devices, hospital equipment, as well as construction equipment for all the massive reconstruction effort that country needs. Third, he also wants Indian companies to be allowed to invest in Ukraine and wants to promote that, met with investors while he was in Delhi. Meanwhile, after the Kuleba-Jaishankar meeting, here's what the two sides said.
Now, after the Kuleba-Jaishankar meeting, here's what the two sides said. In a tweet, Jaishankar said that he and Kuleba had exchanged views on initiatives relating to the Ukraine conflict and also discussed cooperation on trade, the health sector, science and technology. Kuleba said that the two sides had paid specific attention to the Swiss Peace Formula initiative. While no big agreements were announced, they did agree to meet again later this year.
So what is the role that India can play and what's in it for New Delhi? One, by participating in the Swiss summit, India could project itself in a global peacemaking role as a responsible interlocutor. It can also leverage its ties with Russia, which have thus far, remember, been viewed very negatively in the West. But now it can put it forth as in a positive manner by saying, here, we can actually convey this message for you, or we could work between the two sides. India will also represent the Global South's emphasis on ensuring food, energy, fertilizer supplies are not disrupted. This has been a major concern. Meanwhile, countering China's growing footprint in the space, given that Beijing has already proffered a peace proposal for Ukraine, its own peace proposal for Ukraine. It hasn't moved much yet. But remember, it has already effected an agreement or peace agreement between Saudi Arabia and Iran last year. So Beijing is clearly trying to build a track record here. However, and there has to be this however, India's abstentions at the UN, its balancing act on the Russian invasion, refusing to criticize Russia's actions, sending humanitarian support to Ukraine, but doing much of its diplomacy behind the scenes, all indicate that New Delhi may prefer a less visible role rather than the role that Ukrainian's foreign minister envisaged when he visited. So what's Worldview's take? If India aspires for global leadership, the opportunity to play a role in resolving one of the world's biggest conflicts must not be taken lightly. While there is always the risk of public failure, a prominent role in the peace process would also help India campaign, for example, for the UN Security Council permanent membership, a big objective, as well as the more immediate run for temporary membership of the UNSC in 2028. Let's get you some reading recommendations. I'm trying to get you the latest books on this issue. And of course, it is always very difficult to find balance because most of the English language books written in English tend to have quite a bias against Russia. So here's one called Memory Makers, The Politics of the Past in Putin's Russia by Jade McGlynn. She's also author of Russia's War, and it really is a look much more at trying to look at the underpinnings of Russian policy. What is it that really drives Russia, and why is it not being understood around the world? Why is it so difficult to understand what's going on inside Russia? Another book called Russia-Ukraine War, The Conflict and Its Global Impact by Ajay Singh, because it's always nice to get an Indian perspective on any conflict. The Russo-Ukrainian War by Sari Ploki. I do plug this quite often, but the truth is that it's important to get a sense of what the history is, and Ploki is a very well-regarded historian. The Lost Peace, How the West Failed to Prevent a Cold War by Richard Sakwa. This is important because it really looks at the post-1990 period and the lost opportunities there. A more academic book called The Role of BRICS in Large-Scale Armed Conflict, Building a Multipolar World Order by Malt Prosig would make much more sense though, except that Russia is in this case a party to the conflict. And then there's this, The Ukraine War and the Eurasian World Order by Glenn Deason. This is a book recommended by a senior Indian former diplomat, so I do hope you will read it. I haven't yet, but come back to me with your feedback and do join us again here on Worldview from the team. Thanks for watching.